Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Prashant Verma from NASSCOM. So thank you for joining our session on composable architecture is the future of business. Is India ready? So we have with us Mr. Arun Srilalan Iyer and Mr. Mayank Mishra from Content Stack. So Mayank will be hosting this session and Mayank will be our speaker for the day. Over to you, Arun.
Thank you very much, Prashant, and thanks for joining the call, Mayank, and to all our uh, audience participants. Please keep yourselves on mute, and if you have any queries or comments, you can probably drop a note in the chat window, and I will ask Prashant to pick some of them to discuss at the end of the session. So today we have Mayank Mishra from Content Stack to tell us and walk us through the philosophy behind composable architecture. My name is Arun Iyer. I lead product management at Bajaj Finserv for a new super app across the Bajaj Finserv group. I have about 10 years of experience in product management across various different organizations. Uh, so welcome everyone to the session and let's get started. Mayank, would you like to take a minute to tell us more about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me here and thanks for the invitation. It's nice to be here. So hi everyone, I'm Mayank Mishra. I'm passionate about building and scaling products, and I'm working as a VP of engineering at Content Stack. Content Stack, it's a headless content experience platform.
Thanks, Mayank. So let's get started. Uh, we Let's start with this session with laying out some context about the main agenda or the topic of the session, which is composable architecture. This has become a recent trend and and an emerging buzzword among in the tech circles, among several companies, among several startups. Could you kind of demystify it a bit and tell us what composable architecture is all about, Mayank?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an architecture that focuses on building independent, scalable, reusable, um, services that you can plug and play to meet your business requirements. To give you an analogy, think of it as a Lego bricks, and the bricks acting as independent services that you can easily plug and play to create a model out of it. Right, so that's pretty much a composable architecture. And if you take an example, uh, imagine you're creating an e-commerce application, and that has CMS use case for content management, that has a site search use case to search the product catalog or search the website. You have analytics, you have segmentation or personalization use cases. So with composable architecture, what you can do, you can pick best of breeds services, and create your e-commerce application. So for CMS, you can pick something like Content Stack that empowers your content needs. For site search, you can use Constructor.io, Elasticsearch. There's so many players. There's so many players on the analytics side. There's so many segmentation and personalization solutions. So this architecture allows you to pick the services that you think meets your business requirements. So yeah, in summary, it gives you flexibility, agility, when it comes to building your business architecture.
Absolutely. So if I understand you right, you're essentially saying that composable architecture allows an organization or essentially a CTO to make decisions regarding which is the best tool suited for a certain use case. For example, if people feel that uh, maybe Mixpanel is the best tool for a certain segmentation or any kind of communications use case, go ahead with it. Similarly, however you would like to build your front end and middle and back end stack for each different application, for each different use case, you might want to choose the best in class, the best available in the market, best of breed solution available for that particular use case, assemble them together, and that is kind of the core philosophy behind a composable architecture. Now, this brings into question: how do these different tools or subsystems talk to each other? Do they is it very hard configuring them, or how do they talk to each other?
Yeah. So the API is the connecting glue between the services. Okay. And I would say, I guess a couple of decades back, it was not so easy to integrate services. Okay. But now today, with the advancement in the technology, it's quite easier to connect services. You just, inject a JavaScript snippet to, start collecting analysis about your website, right? So the API is the key here. If the service offers APIs and the integration capabilities, then it becomes easier to get these services talk to each other.
Absolutely. So for context, and we have a mix of people who are fairly well versed with technical concepts and some who may be new to them. Could you explain how APIs work and how do they help tech systems talk to each other in a reliable manner, please?
Yeah, Arun, can you repeat that question again?
Sorry. So my question was for the benefit of some folks here who might be new to the concept of APIs and how they are used to build ecosystems of systems, ecosystems of services. Could you explain how APIs work and how can they be connected to build this ecosystem, please?
Yeah, I mean, think of APIs as a way to interact with your system. Right? If, let's say, I as a person, I'm a service, suppose, right? So I would be exposing an API, like an interface, to interact with these services offered by me, right? So yeah, I'm just trying to explain, simplify the API concept here, right? So the services like, let's say, um, analytics mixed panel you mentioned, right? So they would come up with an API to interact with them, and all the features that they have that would be communicated over API, right? So, and this is the practice across the industry that's being followed now, like API first. Right? And we co-founded Mark Compliance, Mark Alliance for this. I'll talk to, I'll expand that further in our conversation. But yeah, I hope that, answers the question here.
Fair enough. So just to summarize, APIs are essentially a kind of a handshake. So we don't need to know what's going on behind that handshake. It's the equivalent of, say, calling up Domino's and ordering a pizza. We don't need to know how the pizza gets made, so long as the phone number remains the same and it eventually gets delivered to your doorstep. I'm kind of simplifying it into a real world kind of experience. So all of these components speak to each other via APIs. Now, given that these components use APIs, which are essentially machines or software layers talking to each other, how can a user control, or how can can admin user administer these tools? Since, as you mentioned, that these are headless as well, right? So could you explain a little more about headless technology and the configuration of the same?
Yeah, sure. So headless means omni-channel. Okay, so I'll give an example. Okay, so in early 2000, web was the only channel back then, and the CMS providers, they created a solution that was mainly focused for the web because there was no other channel. But with the tech evolution, we have more channels now, like mobile devices, watch, kiosk. So there's a demand in delivering content across multiple channels, not just web. Okay, so with the non-headless player, like I call them traditional players, they were designed and architected in a such a way. It was like tightly coupled and just for the web. Okay, so that's where the idea of headless comes in, right? So the way to deliver content across multiple channels. So yeah.
Thanks, Mayank. So again, to put it in a slightly different way, headless CMSs or headless systems essentially ensure that configuration is consistent and machine readable. Whereas earlier uh, with bespoke systems or with traditional systems, one would buy a 60-70% ready solution from the market and do a lot of configuration and a lot of custom development over it to build it to specific use cases within an organization. Headless systems kind of automate that to a larger extent. However, they do come with their own set of, I won't say challenges, their own different kind of processes that need to be understood by users when it comes to configuring and maintaining them. Let's move on to further in the conversation of the composable architecture. What is the benefit that organizations would see from adopting a composable architecture?
Yeah. So before getting to that, I mean, in general, like, so I believe the biggest moat that any organization can have, that's velocity. How faster you deliver things. Okay, that is on the at the org level itself, not just product or engineering. So with composable architecture, I think the velocity is number one thing, number one benefit that an organization gets. So there's a report by Gartner stating by 2023, the organizations who have adopted for composable architecture, they will outpace the competition by 80% when it comes to delivering new features. So it's, yeah, I mean, we talked about the Lego example as well, right? So think about this, like, so as a CTO or a business leader, I want to go fast, okay, but at the same time I want to ensure that I have a room for failure. Okay, so it enables you to fail fast. So imagine service A, let's say analytics service that is not meeting your business requirements. So with this architecture, what you could do, you can just say, okay, this is not working out, let's just replace it with some other service, right? So it gives you that agility. So velocity, agility, I think these are the top two benefits that I see with the composable architecture. Yeah, and for me, I think it's the future of and the foundation of your digital transformation journey, right? So it is a journey. You're not gonna enable all the business processes into digital world right away, right? So how do you get there? So you gotta have the right architecture in place that gives you, that flexibility, agility, velocity to get ahead.
Absolutely. And I echo the thought about the unfair advantage that companies can have probably in the next couple of decades now is velocity. In fact, I would say it's the learnability. The faster organizations, people, processes can learn and adapt to the changing environment around them, the more I don't want to call it robust. I'll use the Nassim Nicholas Taleb's term anti-fragile. That means though there will be economic shocks, there will be market shocks and whatnot, the organization should still remain resilient to all of these and be able to survive and thrive. And as Mayank says, a composable architecture is a kind of step forward to that. And as you mentioned, the Gartner report says by 2023, organizations had better move to the composable architecture, or else risk being obsolete. We're already in 2023, so it's time to buck up.
Yeah,
Fair.
and on top of
Yeah,
that, I
go
would like to add a couple of more use cases. I think that would be beneficial for the audience too. So we have customers and we have case studies. Okay, so customer claims that after moving from monolith to composable architecture, they could see 500% improvement in the development process. And certain times, even when I see those data sets, I get amazed too. Like, okay, that sounds unreal, sometimes. So yeah, we have seen like so many case studies, and it's all publicly available. So I would encourage all the audience here to take a look at the case studies that we have hosted on contentstack.com website. If you want to learn more about composable architecture. Yeah.
Thanks. To give again a very brief gist about my understanding of composable architecture, after which we can dive more into the MAC framework or the MAC concept. To the audience, you may know that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, manufacturing, most companies, most large-scale manufacturing companies used to run their own power generation plants, right? There was no standardized power coming from a central power supply outlet. So imagine there is one company running some kind of a workshop, and they are generating AC power, or probably more likely to be DC, at say 200 volts. Someone else is doing 250 volts, someone else is doing 180 volts at whatever different frequencies. They are running different non-standard applications. They are plugging in their systems into non-standard interfaces. These are not the 3-pin plugs that you see in houses and any kind of machinery today. That was the situation, which led to huge interoperability problems and definitely maintenance problems. So organizations used to have up to 60% of their workforce just maintaining the power, not delivering what they are supposed to deliver to the customer, right? They're just getting the back-end systems running so that the remaining 40% can actually work on what they want to deliver to the market. So in a similar way, today IT systems are consuming a lot of effort and bandwidth from the CTO to just keep themselves running. Forget about delivering what the company wants to deliver to the customer, right? So this is where, just like standardization of power outlets came as a boon to everyone, and hence your company doesn't have to worry about generating power. Just like that solved such a big problem, composable architecture can go the way of solving the problem for the CTO. So with that, let's talk a little more about how composable architecture can minimize vendor lock-in and understand more about the MARC framework, please.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this architecture gives you flexibility, right? So as far as any service has APIs with it, you can easily, replace that. So, it minimizes the risk of vendor lock-in. But, I would say there is a possibility of vendor lock-in if, let's say, if you pick up one service that has unique offering, which is not there with other services, right? For example, let's say analytics service that has some, I'm just throwing it out there, right? So that is just a possibility. Like that service may have certain features that is not offered by some other analytical services. So in that case, vendor lock-in may come in, but overall the architecture reduces the risk of it, right? So when you evaluate these services, I think that should be one of the checklists, right? How do you want to pick up your service? Like, do you want to go with the vendor lock-in feature as well? So the way we function, I mean, we have this checklist, like, okay, what services we are picking in? Okay, is it available, is it kind of a vendor lock-in thing, or it can be, let's say, provided by other services too? So at least there should be one backup. So yeah, so this architecture does reduces the risk of vendor lock-in, because there are so many players now and they do have that API to integrate. And on the MARC side, so yeah, so one of the things, like, how do you ensure, like, you are using composable architecture? And so we said, okay, there are 4 pillars, principles, and we call it MARC. Okay, and so M stands for microservices, A in MARC stands for API first, C stands for cloud native, and H stands for headless. So we said, okay, if the service is is using these 4 principles, if you have this as checked in your checklist, then that is a part of your composable architecture. So it's a way to validate whether you're using composable architecture or not. And we co-founded MARC Alliance. So this is an alliance that advocates best of breeds solutions, okay, and educates industry about composable architecture. And we already talked about, like, what is microservice and them, but just to again reiterate that, it's like think about decomposing a bigger application into smaller services, and delivering your business needs. And the individual services you should be able to deploy the individual services, right? It should not be like a monolith. By monolith, I mean, imagine if you're building a CMS like solution wherein you have multiple use cases, like you want to serve images, you want to serve assets, you have a workflow feature, you have webhook feature, and so on, so many features. And if you end up having one single source code to deliver this, And every time you make a push, you're compiling all the source code. You are, again, just running that single pipeline to deploy the feature. Just imagine, right, how much time it will take. So yeah, I mean, the monolith is not gonna work. I think it's you gotta move out of it if you want velocity. So microservices, APIs we already talked about. Uh, Cloud native, yes, it needs to be cloud compliant, should be on the cloud, and the headless, which we already discussed what that means.
Absolutely. There are a couple of questions that I'm just looking at, and they have a few themes. So the first is by a few folks is how is this different from, say, a microservices architecture or a service-oriented architecture? Now, again, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Mayank. But my input is that uh, composable architecture, as Mayank mentioned, as part of Mark, microservices is one of the four pillars, right? So, of course, it's an integral pillar, and the philosophy kind of extends from the microservices architecture framework, where you build individual submodules that are resilient, and even if those crash, something else can always be brought up. But microservices is primarily used for a system's own backend, for your business logic that is sitting somewhere and is driven by an API. Extending that across the suite of tools and services that an enterprise IT system or an IT deployment would need, including monitoring systems, including reporting systems, financial auditing, all of these, including things like logging, debugging, whatever. All of these are best-in-class tools that you can literally plug and play, and that is kind of the core concept around Mark, and hence around Composable. Any thoughts from you, Mayank? Then we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, I think you covered that very well, Arun. I think the intent with service oriented architecture is still the same. Like they're trying to create a service, right? And again, the intent is to have that independent unit. Yeah.
Right. And the other question, which I would be uh, curious to learn about myself, is what are the security or privacy risks, or yes, security and privacy risks you mitigate in such a distributed kind of environment where there are a lot of moving pieces, and things can essentially plug in and plug out. How do you administer for security and privacy, especially data security and privacy?
Yeah. So on that side, I think you should look at the organization, whether they have the compliances, the security compliances in place or not, like SOC Type 2 or ISO 27001, GDPR compliance. So I think with these compliances coming in, I think it is helping the SaaS applications out, right? Not to just focus on-prem, right? So with on-prem, you always think about, okay, the data is with you, it's secured, it's with it's in your premise. With SaaS, there has been a question around it, but personally, I believe it needs education. Okay, that okay, SaaS applications, mark-based applications are also secured as far as they're following those compliances which I just mentioned, and there may be some additional compliances relevant to the specific industries like healthcare or finance.
Absolutely. So thanks for that input, Mayank. And I'd summarize that by saying it's a combination. So it comes to a point where security and privacy is not a tech-only problem. You would have to make interventions on governance and policies. So, internal and external governance. How do you set up your own enterprise to, or how do you set up the right governance policies in your enterprise so that data is not breached between your clients and across your departments and so on. So that is internal governance. You would also use other interventions like tighter vendor selection. You would have a bit. You would ask for the right disclosures and the right certifications, as Mayank mentioned, on whether the vendor tools that you're trying to adopt follow the right data governance and data security policies on their end, so that even if you're internally following the right governance, you ensure that your customers' data is not compromised by other parties, right? Moving on. So, how is this trend of adopting composable architecture shaping up across the world, and especially in India?
Well, I think it's getting a momentum. So talking about US and Europe region, I think it's in the mainstream now. Initially, it was a bit difficult to get people adopted to composable architecture, but I think it's in the mainstream now. With India, uh, I haven't seen much talks about composable architecture, but that could be just me. But I think there is a huge potential and opportunity for India to talk about composable architecture, get to learn more about it. Yeah, and I want to thank Arun to the NASSCOM, okay, for giving this opportunity for me and my organization to talk about what is composable architecture. I think this is a contribution to that as well. So yeah, I think on India side, more education is needed. We all need to work together to create awareness program around this.
Absolutely. So it's not just products and features that product managers work on that need awareness. These kind of different frameworks and paradigm shift also need to build the right awareness. And as Mike mentioned, India is at the cusp of essentially adopting software products and software frameworks uh, in the startups and unicorns that we see. They're literally cropping up nearly every year. And as we transition from a mature software services industry to the next step forward, which could mean software products, and furthermore, you have technological disruptions on AR, VR, and industry 4.0 and 5G and so on, many other exciting new interventions coming in. The industry can move to adopt composable architecture as well as one of their frameworks and take it forward from there. So, in your experience, Mayank, for some of the clients that you may have worked with, what were some of the challenges that they faced initially, initial hurdles when moving from a traditional or a monolithic architecture to a composable architecture?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge with almost majority of the organization is like challenging the status quo. Okay. There's a saying like, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? And like in Hindi, लोग बोलते हैं, right? It's like चलता है, right? चलने दो. So that चल रही है चीजें चलने दो. So that is the mindset and attitude, right? So I think the biggest challenge was the changing that mindset, and okay, this is a new thing, right? So, and I get the I understand their perspective too, right? It's not easy to adopt something. So the biggest challenge was like explaining what is composable architecture and how it would benefit them. Now it is quite easier because we have so many validations, right? Case studies, major brands, they have adopted this pattern. So now it becomes quite easy. But a decade back, it wasn't that easy. So yeah, education and changing their mindset, explaining why this is needed, right? Why this is going to be a business killer if you don't adopt it, this architecture.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I read a couple of books and articles and things, and just for the benefit of the audience, as you undertake any kind of change management program, and digital transformation is a huge change management program that enterprises are undertaking, you encounter what is called the organizational immune system, right? Just like in our bodies, when there is an intruder, the immune system of the body wakes up to prevent that intruder from getting deep into the organs and messing up the core systems. Organizations, processes, and behaviors are such that when an intervention like a digital transformation or any kind of change management intervention is taken up, the organization will tend to react to push against that, right? So it needs a lot of executive sponsorship and buy-in, the top leaders being committed to making this kind of change, especially with digital transformation, and following either composable architecture or any of the other frameworks that they decide on, and push it through the organization, saying that, hey, this might feel like an intrusion, but it's a welcome change. It's like eating healthy food. So yeah, welcome it in, and let it permeate through the organization, let it permeate through the body, and eventually the organization will thrive and grow better as a result of it, right? So thanks for sharing that. That executive buy-in and awareness and the education about the benefits would be some of the challenges, initial challenges that that organizations could face. Any examples on how you would have tackled some of them in your experience?
Yes, for sure. So that time we also had one other sister organization, so Raw Engineering. So one of the challenge was to actually how to get that done, right? I mean, you got to educate the engineers as well. Like, oh, there's a shift in the architecture, right? So how are you going to implement that? So we, I mean, we were expert in the CMS industry. Like we used to implement the CMS system for the enterprise clients. So we knew like what it takes to implement that in traditional fashion. So with composable and with the decoupled approach, so we had that team who actually built it, demoed like how this is done. Okay, and then we had to work with our early adopters customers to onboard them, to ensure their engineers gets like how this is implemented on tech side. On business side, uh, their business users understand what is the experience of managing the content, right, compared to the traditional way. So it was more about creating a win story, showcase them how this is done, educate them by working with them, like do partnership with them. So yeah, that's how we tackle that, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, a lot of, as you said, behavioral and mindset shifts that are required to push this through. I just see a question: are there any specific challenges on the technical side? Let me take a stab at it, and then we can take Mayank's thoughts on that. So on the technical side, you will often find it's essentially legacy training. So engineers or any operators in any company would be used to those tools that are configured in that enterprise. Maybe they are working on mainframe applications or enterprise applications that have been around for a long time. So one, there is a skills issue with the operators or the developers in this case. How do you upskill them on new technologies? Many folks are unwilling or unable to upskill. Maybe they have spent so long outside of the mainstream industry in their specific silo that they are unable to suddenly adopt the new thinking practices. So that takes coaching, and that takes effort on upskilling. The others are unwilling because they might feel that, hey, I've done this for the last 15 years, why should I change for just some newfangled thing that is coming in? So kind of giving them the guidance that yes, this is here to stay. It's the new coming in over the old. So again, kind of mindset and behavior shifts, but that will require reskilling and upgradation of the technologies and the systems. The other thing that may be required is that, by definition, large enterprises, especially those that are successful, have legacy systems and applications deep into their processes. So if they have a very stable ERP system that they have configured over several years, any senior leader would be hesitant to quickly switch to a different module because they don't know what could go wrong. They have a running business which is making revenue and whatnot, and they can't put that at risk suddenly, especially for very sensitive applications. So one of the solutions here to just help the mindset shift would probably be to ask the CTO or the COO or the CEO that pick some applications which are not core business critical. So something like maybe vendor management applications or invoicing applications or something like that, which we don't obviously want them to fail, but there are backup processes or something in case there are unforeseen scenarios. Transfer those systems to a composable architecture and hence build conviction that composable architecture works, and from that you can build on and move further into the core systems and processes. Mayank,
Yeah.
any of your thoughts?
Yeah, Arun. So yeah, I would suggest to follow crawl, walk, run methodology. Start small. Okay. Somehow vertically slice down your use case, your story, and take that portion on the composable architecture side. Okay, and see how that goes. Understand the benefits of it, right? And infuse that the new mindset shift in your team and in your culture. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mayank. And last question before we can maybe open up for any comments or suggestions from the audience. So assuming some of the folks in the audience here or others are excited to try out this new composable architecture, so the mindset shift has been kind of solved to some extent. How can they get started? What are the resources that they can reach out to or to refer to get started with this?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So the first step is to again crawl. You study about it, like what is composable architecture. Okay. Get to know more about it. We have guides on this specific topic. And maybe Arun, we can share links with the audience. I don't know if there's a way to add this in the YouTube description also, but yeah, so get started with learning, understand why of this. Okay. And then after that, as we previously discussed, you have to try it. Okay. Once you learn, you try it out. And how do you try it out? Create, just look at your business, slice down the less risky component, less risky your business use case, and implement composable architecture with that. Okay. Just give it a try. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I hope that helped the listeners here. I see a couple of questions which we seem to have covered. Hanoak asks, when it comes to composable architecture, how to make India join the mainstream and what are the ways to achieve it? We kind of touched upon that. Start off with Indian startups, Indian unicorns, embracing the idea of composable architecture and implementing it for themselves and for their clients. So those would be the ways to achieve it. Any other questions or comments, or Prashant, would you like to speak a little more about maybe further upcoming webinars or other sessions that we may be having?
Sure, Arun. So we'll be having a masterclass series on fintech domain, and that masterclass is scheduled on February 2nd. So we'll be sharing the collaterals with all the attendees over here in a while. Also about the questions, like we have got multiple questions today on the session. So it would be great, like I'll be sharing questions with you, and then you can ask the same with Mayank. Hope that works.
Sure, we could do it. You're essentially asking it to both of us. So please pick some of the questions and let us know.
Sure. So we have a question from Mr. Hanook. He's asking, when it comes to composable architecture, how do we make India to join mainstream and what are the ways to achieve it?
Yeah, we touched upon that, but I would, again, cover that point. So to get to the mainstream, I think it takes a lot. So it starts with the adoption phase, the early adopters. And I think we're still at that. And to cross that chasm, we need to, talk more about it, right? Just keep educating the Indian tech industry about composable architecture. Keep talking about why this is important, why this is business killer, and how it is done. So yeah, I think the education is the key here. Yeah, on the why side, one other story just popped up, so I'll quickly cover that too. So you might have heard about the Blockbuster versus Netflix story. So Blockbuster, they were like into the DVD rental business, like the leaders in the early 90s. And they could not prepare themselves for the that digital transformation. So their business strategies, their tech foundation, it wasn't ready to adopt the future need. They couldn't move faster. And Netflix today, we all know what it is doing, right? And Blockbuster, it just got delisted from the market. So it is. So to me, this is risky. If you are losing out on velocity, your competitors will kill you. So yeah.
So we have another question from Mr. Kunal Rane. Is composable architecture, more specifically microservice, better than monolith for real-time data application?
Yes, I mean for any kind of application. So just think about the benefits that you get, right? I mean, just in a generalized way, you need ability to, fail and replace, right? Replace the services that you're trying out. So this is applicable for real time as well as any other application.
Right, and the question from Kunal is specifically to industrial IoT. Very much so, because you might so industrial IoT, you would want to the industry tools are already there, right? If you're literally talking about heavy engineering processes, those are already there. Now the IoT part of it, which is Internet of Things, which are gathering data, bunch of sensors, bunch of actuators and things like that. The governance and the software to drive them, you would want to keep that as flexible as possible to be able to react to different situations and to support new use cases as they come. Now, let's not make it that abstract. Let's take a more specific use case. Say something like Tesla, right? It has a whole bunch of sensors and actuators and things. Tesla actually claims you might wake up one day to find that your car has downloaded a new feature, right? It's a device that is on wheels. It's not so much a car that is intelligent. It's more of a computing device on wheels. So when you want industrial IoT to move towards that kind of a framework, then probably a distributed composable architecture, as Mayank mentioned, would be quite useful. The next question that we have from Vaibhav is, how does this architecture fit into the future of AI first or AI only applications? The fact that you're asking this, Vaibhav, means you must be familiar with OpenAI and ChatGPT. So you know the breakneck pace at which AI first and AI only applications are moving. And accordingly, they need the right flexible, resilient backend systems to be able to govern and to administer them. Again, I would say even things like what kind of an ML model would you want to train? Is it even a neural network? Is it a random forest? Is it something or the other? Is something that you would want to be able to have flexibility upon and definitely not build into a monolithic application or monolithic architecture. So I would say this fits. Any thoughts from you, Mayank?
Yeah, and so I think you covered it well. So that AI first or AI only application, it is going to be consisting of multiple services in the back end and also in the front end, and eventually it does have an API to interact with that service. For example, data pre-processing that checks the data quality, and there's another service that takes care of somehow in optimizing the model, right? So now you don't have to just write all of these things in monolith fashion, right? So just think about how can you actually slice down your services so that they can act as an independent service. And the goal is to have its own deployment, service. I mean, you should be able to deploy that service on its own. So one changes, this service should not be like, okay, I have to run the entire platform testing again, right? So yeah, so that's how it should be constructed.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mayank, and thanks everyone. We have a few minutes left, so if there are any last questions, we could take that. Else, I thank you all for joining and hope you have a great day.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any questions right now. We'll wait for.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and thanks for your time. It was a lovely session. Thank you, and thanks to NASSCOM again for giving me this opportunity to talk about Composable. And thanks to the audience for asking lovely questions and giving their time.
Same here. Thanks to NASSCOM. Thanks to Mayank and Content Stack and the audience. I will end the session now. Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.